Ashley, I'm so excited you're here. Welcome. Welcome to the
Thank
Strong Souls
you.
podcast. Yes. You guys, I want to give a little bit of an intro as you're starting this episode. Ashley Rose Klein, is a PCOS hormone and weight loss coach. And I am so excited to have this episode with her ever since I met her through the gram. I have been just absolutely obsessed and adored her. And we've been able to have a coffee meetup and get to know each other more. Ashley has a book coming out for those of you who are PCOS um, patients, people who experience those symptoms. This is going to be a really, really helpful message for you. But for anyone else who's just in that lane where you're trying to be able to better yourself, I really am excited for you to hear from Ashley. And I love that your cat is with you. This is so awesome.
Of course. He's probably going to interrupt us a few times. He's going to be too interrupted by cuteness, right?
He's so handsome. Oh my gosh.
That's what I say.
So I wanted to start off, Ashley. I'm so excited for this conversation because we're going to learn so much from you. But I wanted to start us off with a question of why is stress the self-sabotaging secret sauce?
Yeah. So stress, it just compounds, and I feel like we learn to operate through it rather than addressing what's causing it. So it's like we become this autopilot program, just like our computers and our phones, and we don't stop to take care of ourselves because we're, running around thinking we're taking care of everyone else in our lives. We're showing up for work, we're working a lot, we're going home, we're taking care of things at home, and whatever else comes up for folks. But the thing is you're white knuckling through everything, and you're disrupting those hormones. You're losing out on sleep. You're losing hunger cues. You're losing mental focus. You're losing energy. And no one wants to stop and look at what could really be causing that, right? So.
Yeah, because it's the norm. Like this is just how we do life. I feel like we could go on a whole like coffee philosopher talk about like why do we have a society that is so stress focused that I'm from Virginia where like when you're on 7, which is a main highway, everyone's just like they're just white knuckling. They're from point A to point B and they're giving everyone the bird. And I'm like, where is the joy and the peace and the love? And they're just, go, go, go. And that's just a societal thing. And now I'm in a different area where that's just like not the case. Everyone's very chill. Yeah. Praise the Lord. But like, it's just it very much is a societal thing. I have to do things this way. I have to add X, Y, and Z to my plate. I have to, I have to. And then, going into both of our worlds where our worlds kind of collide, those people still have goals with their health. And so they start diving into like getting a coach or focusing on nutrition. So you mentioned, in things that we've talked about in the past, like they don't even address things like stress. So what is kind of like your experience with a lot of the clients that you have now where this is a big conversation where you're addressing stress and you're educating them on that? What do you kind of bring to light and how do you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can't fill anyone else's cup when your cup is empty.
Right.
So it is as simple as, maybe adding resistance training if that's not something that we're doing. And I feel like there's a lot of taboo behind that as well, even for most of my clients, as they already are most of the time overweight from PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And with it having a metabolic side and also, physical appearances, effects and things like that, it just makes it really difficult to make progress. And so I've put in a really simple framework. I call it my 3-3-3 method, which is where that working out 3 times a week comes into play.
Okay.
For most of my clients, we're going to want to add resistance training, and it doesn't have to be high intensity training.
Right.
And you don't have to gain a lot of muscle or become bulky. And I think that's something that a lot of women just kind of think in their head, you know, it's like, okay, if I lift weights, if I look at a weight, my bicep's going to be huge, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to take
misconception.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to take you years to get
Yes.
bulky. Like,
yes.
don't
You're
flatter
eating
yourself.
yes. Like, we all want to think that. And, you know, we're all following these people that we aspire to be, right? Or like, oh, I love what her life looks like on social media. And social media, I think that's dangerous because we're posting all of our highlights. We're posting the highs. We're posting the times where we feel good most of the time, right? But the resistance training in that component is super important when it comes to metabolism.
Yeah.
Because again, PCOS contains that metabolic component, right? So a lot of my clients have insulin resistance, which is where, you know, the foods that we're eating are not responding the way that we would expect them to. Your body's not converting those sugars the way it's supposed to. And so they're seeing high spikes of energy and then low drops. So low that all they feel like they want to do is go back to bed, right? And then we have brain fog, and then we don't want to do work, or we don't want to show up the way we normally could. So just simply by adding strength training 3 times a week, we could increase our metabolism. And over time, that's going to compound. One of the big things I teach in my program is also the power of 1%. So this idea that 1% each day is going to add up and compound like the interest in your bank account. So so step 1 is the 3 times a week strength training. And then we're going to look to do 3 meals a day. And if it's not 3 meals a day, I have some clients that'll do 1 or 2 meals a day because that's where they're at. And we have to start with where we're at. And again, add that small 1% every day. And then the last step is mindfulness. So we're going to do 3 mindfulness checks per day. And for me, I like to do that in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening. So it kind of allows you to break up your day because some people are better in the morning and some people are better in the afternoon and some people are better in the evening. So it's just allowing us to check in with ourselves mentally, physically. Why am I feeling this way? Am I anxious? Okay, let's stop. And you can even do mindfulness checks for like 3 minutes and it can make a monumental difference, you know? Like for me, I've had to stop. If I have a million things on my to-do list, I start thinking about all of them, even eating right or getting my workout in for the day. I can't even think to do it. And I do it all the time. I'm a coach. But I have to stop. And I've had to stop and go for a walk. And then after I come back from the walk, I'm feeling mentally clear and ready to take on whatever I was supposed to step into. So
yeah, that's so good. That's a really very like simple, broken down way. It's very applicable to that anyone can do.
Yeah.
A lot of those things are things I talk about with my clients too. And I want to come back to the mindfulness part really quickly because I think that's a really good foundation to talk about stress. But I want to go back to PCOS for a second. So when you're working with someone who maybe they don't know that they have PCOS, or maybe they do know, whatever stage that they're in, what are the red flags or what are the indications that you usually look for where you're like, okay, there's a process we need to follow based off this symptom that you've just shared with me, or you probably, I mean, I know you're not a doctor, and a lot of clients, even, you know, I'm going to be really kind, but also bold here. A lot of clients like self-diagnose, and they're not doctors. But I think, you know, what is the range of symptoms that you look at to be able to kind of indicate, okay, this is where you're at, that we can be able to start making steps towards helping you in this area. Does that resonate at all? Or is that something that you do look at and you're like, okay, here we go?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely resonates. Gosh. So, I mean, the biggest thing is stress. And that's where I'm going to start with them. Now, with PCOS being such a complex condition, it is different for every single woman. There are actually 4 types of PCOS,
Okay.
and it is possible to have more than one at the same time. So that the big one that I mentioned was the insulin resistant PCOS, right? I'd say about 80% of women with polycystic ovarian syndrome have insulin resistance. And that's that metabolic component that I was sharing with you. So that is where, a lot of times they're coming to me and I'm eating right, I'm working out, but I'm not losing weight. Okay. You have PCOS, or do you suspect it? We kind of start there.
Okay.
And I go down the rabbit hole with them of what symptoms they're experiencing. But the main things that, a doctor would look for if they were going to diagnose someone with PCOS would be irregular cycles, polycystic ovaries, so cysts on the ovaries, but that's also not a requirement to have PCOS anymore. And back when I was getting diagnosed and going through that, I was very lean. I didn't have the overweight component so much, but I was an athlete. I was moving all the time. And so there we go with that movement piece being so important.
Yeah.
So for the women who are overweight, even losing, 5-10% of their weight, they can see symptoms improve drastically. And that's even if the symptoms are coming out from the high androgens, which would be high testosterone usually, DHT. And here we would get hair on our face or on our chin. Some get them around their breasts and down their navel. It's male style hair patterns that show up for these women, and that is from that elevated level of testosterone usually. So they look for the androgen symptoms, they look for the irregular cycles, they look for the ovarian cysts, and now they are also doing blood test work. So that's important, of course, to identify the insulin resistant component. But we also have inflammatory PCOS, we have adrenal or stress PCOS, and we have post-pill PCOS. So, and post-pill is an interesting one and a whole nother can of worms we could open, because birth control is one of the biggest things doctors prescribe PCOS women to help them. So,
here comes my dog. I should have let you know about that. Anyways, that's huge to know. I don't think a lot of people know about that. I mean, it's coming into the workshop of like what we hear and what we say and that, and the discussions that are had around PCOS, but I don't think it's commonly known. Is that becoming a little bit more common in the conversations that you're having with other people? Like, or do you have birth control and these are the things that you're experiencing?
I've definitely had that conversation with people a lot of times.
Yeah.
Or more so, of course they're on birth control because they want to prevent pregnancy.
Right.
And I feel like that's where we really have the hardest time giving up birth control, because quite literally it's a Band-Aid solution. It is a synthetic amount of hormones, and it's telling your body to do things. And we might think that we're getting a regular cycle because we're experiencing that bleed, but we are just withdrawing from not having that higher level of those hormones, right? So again, if we take that Band-Aid off, what's underneath? Is it still there?
Yeah.
Most of the time, yes, it's there. So then we really have to dive in. We have to look at root cause drivers, and it's different for every woman with PCOS. So.
Well, I want to go back to stress for a second, because you mentioned like that's one of the things that you address when you have someone who starts listing all of those symptoms of those different kinds of PCOS. If I can just kind of share a little bit of my experience, when I'm with a client, quite honestly, and they share that they have PCOS or they share that they have these symptoms going on, and I know that I need to work with them on that. Of course, I acknowledge like that they have stress, but for me, what I've learned is like, that's honestly like, there's all these components, right? There's stress, there's mindset, there's nutrition, there's hydration, there's movement and fitness and et cetera, in that capacity. I've learned, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, I've learned it's easier for clients like that are usually so high stress to focus on actually the fitness and nutrition components first, but with with a intention of getting to like maintenance and keeping it very low key. So building consistency, like you said, with strength training, keeping it low key, being able to put stress on lean muscle tissue and be able to grow metabolically in that capacity. And then nutrition, it's really just about like habits here. And once they see they can build consistency, then for some reason the stress is a lot easier to address. But I want to hear your thoughts, because it sounds like you actually go the other way. You start with stress and then you go with those other habits that I just laid out.
Yeah. Well, actually, Taj, it sounded like your program is very similar to mine, because I thought you were describing my program.
Oh.
I have my sustainable change framework, and it's actually coming out in my book, my debut book.
Yes.
Which is coming out in 2025. So that sounded just exactly like what you were describing.
Oh, okay. Well, let's dive into that. Okay, let's talk about your book a little bit. You mentioned there's an actual process that you have in let's see, I don't have the particular chapter, but you have a framework, a habit building framework around this. Could you break that down then for me?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So with what you had said, and taking it, the stress component into consideration, the first step in my program is mindset. And I had it be mindset because I'm very James Clear, Atomic Habits-esque.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Love him.
Yes.
Just revolutionary. But, just stepping into the identity of the person who you're trying to become, in my mind, has to be number one. Because when I'm looking at a lifelong condition like polycystic ovarian syndrome, I know that I am a woman who's struggling to get pregnant right now. I might be losing hope that I'm ever going to be able to get pregnant. But realistically, I need to step into the mindset of someone who can get pregnant, and kind of those manifestations, right? Like, don't let yourself be beaten down by what's not currently happening, but step into what is tangible and what you can do right now.
Right.
And that's where the power of those small daily habits really come in.
Yeah.
And, I think oftentimes we are so quick to rush into picking up a workout program and getting that started because we see that as the missing piece. And oftentimes it is. It's either fitness or it's nutrition, and sometimes it's both. But with the hundreds of clients that I've worked with over the years, men and women and children, and also people without PCOS, I've just seen this pattern of they're trying to work out, but they're also not eating quote unquote right. Or they don't think they are, right? And most of the time when I sit down and look at their meals, they're just not eating enough.
Right. Another form of stress, right?
Yes, stress. So that's why I really boiled it down to the stress and mindset piece being first. So the first step for a PCOS woman is stepping into their PCOS identity. And that means, okay, what is the lie that I tell myself or I let myself believe every day that needs to leave for me to really be able to step into this? And when I say step into this, I don't mean start a workout program 4 or 5 times a week, hour-long workouts, this and that, just all of a sudden jump to having 3 meals a day, balanced meals, and drinking all the water and sleeping 7 to 9 hours a day, and doing your mindfulness exercises. No, we can't do all of that at once. So we need to really narrow it down and figure out what this person is really struggling with the most.
Yeah.
And then break that down even further. So let's say it is the movement piece. Well, if you desire to be someone who works out every day, what would someone who works out every day do? Well, they would go to the gym every day. Okay, but you're not there yet. So what's something smaller that person might do? Well, they might wake up and drink an entire bottle of water so that they're well hydrated. And you're going to keep doing that thing until it becomes autopilot, which is kind of what we started the episode talking about, right? So my programs are unique because it's taught over a 16-week period. Most folks are after weight loss in my program or lean muscle building. So we start with mindset and identifying those kind of top 3 habits that we want to work on. And because we can't work on all the big things at once, it's typically going to look something like, I want to do something for myself to moderate the amount of stress I'm feeling. So maybe I'm going to try reading for 10 minutes a day. And I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm also going to wake up and drink a bottle of water because I want to be someone who works out every day or takes care of themselves. Maybe there's a third habit, but like I said, it's different for everybody. But the idea is we're moving from mindset, identifying where we need to change that so that we can develop what habits we need to have good nutrition and fitness balance in our lives. And then the last step is maintenance. So it's maintaining all of the things that you built over that 12 to 16 week period and knowing how to change things or just, make those small changes when something difficult comes up in life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good because breaking things down, I think people underestimate very often. And this is very similar to like work that I do with my clients too. So I totally resonate with what you're sharing here. And I think a lot of people also get into the habit of like just working for a goal. I'm not saying goals are bad. Goals are very, very good. But then once the goal is achieved, then what? And so the question I feel I don't know if this would be helpful to you, or maybe you already do this, but a question I found is really helpful for being able to focus on what you're trying to teach and break down even more and just really dissect what people need to really be taking action with and actionable steps towards is thinking about not like, that version of themselves that they're trying to step into, that actual person that they're trying to step into. It's not a goal. It's asking the question of why does this matter to you? And what would this do for you? And as you're showing up as this person, how do you feel? What do you want to feel? Why do you want to feel that way? And those are actually really important questions to ask because those are the same questions you're answering on a daily basis now. But the motive is not conducive to where you want to go. The motive right now is like, just execute, got to do this, got to do that. Also, like you said, thought processes, the beliefs that you're telling yourself to, everything that has to do with habits starts with a belief and then a thought, and the thought transpires into words, and then words transpire into actions, and then those actions transpire into your habits, and then over and over and over again is your result. So I love this conversation so much. I love it because it's just so true. Like, I don't think people break things down enough for themselves. And so they overlook things like, okay, where can I give myself grace? And what really is grace? And, like grace is not saying, oh, I ate the whole cheesecake. Oh, that's okay. I'll give myself grace.
Right.
There's a difference here.
But like, if you want to have a piece of cheesecake, have the cheesecake.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen if you don't? You're going to have it anyway. And you might have the whole cheesecake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, humans don't do well with restriction either.
No. And there's no reason to, there's just the balance component to it. And that's the biggest and most important piece, in my opinion, is right on you for trying to step into living a healthier lifestyle, because that is going to transpire into every life that you touch. And again, if your cup's empty, you can't fill their cup. So what small steps do you need to take to make sure that you're filling your own cup?
Yeah. And recognizing that those steps might take longer. It's not just doing it for a week, but recognizing you're in the middle of changing this life into this other life, like you just said, that you're working on stepping into. That takes time. It's a whole other life. It's a whole other being. So
and that really reminds me of, where I started, Taj. Like, I have always been an athlete. I have always eaten well, quote unquote, right? And it just always felt like there was something missing. And when I would go and see doctors, again, I just felt like I was kind of dismissed. And then it started to feel like my body had betrayed itself, because my doctors weren't telling me anything about how to manage polycystic ovarian syndrome on my own. It was just having these Band-Aid solutions thrown at me, or, a lot of women who are overweight are just being told, hey, just lose weight. And that's so frustrating, because that's the thing that they can't do. So it's like, we're not looking at these lifestyle components. We're not looking at, are we moving enough? Or if we are moving enough, are we moving too intensely? Is our fitness or our movement driving our stress levels even higher, and causing this to just be a vicious cycle? Because that constant high stress is going to disrupt your hormones. And if your hormones are disrupted, you're not going to see weight loss. You're going to see weight gain. You're going to feel puffy. You're going to feel tired, and your brain's going to be foggy. So that it really just became about balancing hormones, learning how to do that. And a lot of times that does require getting some blood work to kind of see where things are at. But even if we can't start there, or if that seems like too intense of a step for someone, like it was for me, it was too intense for me to want to go get my blood work done again. It had been 10 years since I had it done. The last time I had it done, it was horrifying. So, this time, when I do go get updated blood work, I expect my levels will be extremely different, because I went from having 50-day cycles, irregular painful periods, to now 37-day cycles, which is extremely exciting as someone with PCOS, because that's one of the biggest things. And in that instance, we see a lot of elevated estrogen, and we're not making enough progesterone. And so we're not ovulating, or if we are ovulating, we're not ovulating well. And so then here we go again, feeding that vicious cycle. So, and when we have high stress, that cortisol is fueling and bathing your ovaries, your eggs, in excess testosterone. So it's just kind of, again, this vicious cycle that just keeps feeding itself. So that's why I want to start with stress and see what we can do to address that first.
How did you figure that out for yourself? Because that's the reason why you do what you do, is because this was your journey. So how did you figure out that was a big part? And when you did figure that out, what was the biggest step that stood out to you to start taking to help you in that area?
It's a great question. And, I had protocols in place from natural doctors. So I started going the natural route, the more holistic approach, and started seeing a naturopathic doctor. She taught me things about gut health, about detoxing my body properly, and checking to see if it was absorbing things on a cellular level, or absorbing and detoxing. And we found out that it was not, which was related to my body being in a chronic state of fight or flight, and my nervous system being extremely dysregulated. And it can be also from years of unresolved trauma. And trauma is a big word and a whole nother thing we could dive into, but that's in my book as well. My story is in my book. And where I was before I started seeing a naturopathic doctor was a very dangerous place, for a lot of reasons. I mean, I had addictions. I, was using stimulants 24/7 to try to cope. And that is a hormonal sign, right? That my body was telling me, hey, we need to fix this because you're craving these things. I need attention. I need something. So that's when the naturopath kind of came in, and we started doing things like detoxing my liver, and changing diet, just manipulating a few components where I was very carbohydrate heavy. And that's a big thing. It's not to say carbs have to be excluded. And a lot of times with PCOS, we see these PCOS coaches saying dairy and gluten-free, and, to lose weight, dairy and gluten-free. And for some women, yes, if there's an intolerance of some sort, it makes sense to cut those foods. Or maybe if that's something you haven't ever tried, I have done elimination with certain people. I had to do it myself as well, with dairy and gluten. And I'm more gluten intolerant, I did find. So I just limit the amount of certain foods that I have. I know which foods cause adverse reactions in my body. And by that, I mean like would cause me to break out on the back of my legs or my face, or see that influx in facial hair again. And that happens a lot of times with lactose, because lactose has that sugar element in it. And a lot of people don't think of that, or they're not aware of it really. And so I think that's where it's really easy for people to just say, okay, I'm going to cut out dairy, I'm going to cut out gluten. And gluten has a similar, response for your blood sugar as well. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people want to start there. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily if you want to try the elimination, but it needs to be for a long enough period, which was my mistake in the beginning. Is I had these protocols in place that should work. I had homeopathic remedies that my naturopath had put me on to balance my hormones, restore my menstrual cycle, try to bring my cycle back down to, a normal window. But it wasn't working because my stress was still so high. Mm-hmm. And she and my chiropractor would tell me things like, well, maybe you need to do yoga or go on walks. And I was like someone who erred on the side of CrossFit workouts. Like I was almost going to compete in powerlifting. And I've always been this high intensity person, very athletic, very on the move. And I was like, I don't want to lay around. I don't want to go on a walk. I don't want to do those things. But once I started to understand the science behind why, and then I got myself to do those said walks or yoga exercises where I'm elongating and stretching my muscles rather than contracting, tightening, and shortening them all the time. I just understood that it was about balance, like I had to have different things in place. I had to change certain pieces of what I was doing, or it wasn't going to work. It didn't matter what supplements I added. It mattered that I changed the other inputs that were already there for many, many years. The things that led to me experiencing the things I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all of those different things you listed being different components of stress. It's really interesting to hear, because I'm a powerlifter too. And I competed in CrossFit too. I'm like, but I love that stress.
I know. And there's a good amount of cortisol too.
Right? Yeah, right. There's different hormones that are also being produced at that exact same time that are elevating cortisol in a way that supports you to perform better. Yes. And so there's a balance. I think the biggest thing that I run into is that fine line of what is a balance of stress? What is that appropriate stress? And people don't know how to self-monitor, I'm finding. I'd love to hear what you have to say about self-monitoring. One thing that I find that I tell a lot of my clients is, what are the habits? Everyone knows, right? But sometimes you just got to get them to say it first. Yeah. And so I'll ask my clients, like, what are the things that you feel like you're doing right now that are not conducive to where you want to go? And you kind of have to ask that a few times to be able to get people to a cognitive place of saying, oh, well, I actually eat when I'm stressed emotionally. Yeah. And some people don't recognize that they do that. Or I actually just eat every time I get home from work because my job is very stressful. And it's not that eating is bad. It's that you're probably just eating and then you left and you're like, I don't even realize what I just ate. Or there's no mindfulness, or there's no awareness. There's no intentionality. So I don't know if you have any practices for helping people have some sort of self-monitoring. You mentioned like just pausing. When they pause, what are they looking to monitor? What are they looking to reflect on? What are those things, at least, that you maybe talk about?
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, and I love that you said the word awareness there, because that's where my mind went to first.
Yeah.
We need to just become aware. Well, how do I become aware? Well, if you notice that you're trying to work on something in your life, keep thinking about it. Don't beat yourself down, shame yourself, guilt yourself, but even like for me, like smoking or something, like when I used to smoke, I was a stimulant craving person, and I had to ask myself why. Well, for one thing, why I grew up with a family who smoked. And so that behavior was displayed for me over and over and over again. And then why can go even deeper. Well, why do I want this? Why am I craving it? Is it really that bad if I had this thing that I want? Is it? Is it really that bad? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, no. But again, just like with the cheesecake, is it really that bad if I have one piece of cheesecake? No. Is it really that bad if I have the whole thing? Yes. So then we are like, okay, let's have one piece. So then we are allowing ourselves that reward for becoming aware and asking ourselves, okay, what do I need? Why am I wanting this? Just allow yourself to get curious.
Yeah. Why am I doing the things that I do? I hope it's okay, but like while we're talking about tools to help people be able to reflect and be a little bit more aware, this reminds me of a conversation I just had with a client recently to help just slow things down. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I've told her, okay, because very easily stress can come from, I always identify stress as something that you either can't control or it's things that you just don't want to do on a daily basis, right? And a lot of women, especially moms, they're adding a million things to their plate, thinking that there has to be an accomplishment of whatever that they've put in their day. And if it doesn't get done, it's just adding more to the next day. So there's no realistic perspective of how can I actually be productive. And their idea of productivity is just being busy all the time and being busy.
The never ending to-do list.
Right. And it creates stress because it's just never ending and there's no intention behind where am I actually going here. So a lot of things I talk about, which, James Clear talks about too, but like time blocking and why, and or exercise that I just went over with a client was write down all of the things that are on your mental to-do list that are stressing you out on this piece of paper, all of the things that you feel like you can't control, that you don't want to do, that you have to do. Write them all down so you can see them. And then you need to just choose 3 that are going to be able to move you forward. What are the 3 things that are needle moving that by the end of the day, they moved your family forward. They moved you forward and where you're headed. And it's going to be hard to choose, but you have to recognize that you have control somewhere. And you also have to recognize, like, where are the things that really can go to the wayside? Dishes are not going to change history. They're just not.
Yeah.
I
went through that kind of thinking a lot.
Yeah.
I felt like you were talking about an old version of me. And even now, like, owning a business and I'm writing a book and like I'm actively trying to speak more. And just that's just where I see myself. But I think when, again, identity, mindset, awareness, we're stepping into something that we've maybe never done or we haven't done a lot or we've done before, but we feel we've failed. And like, I feel I get that a lot with moms, and I have some mom clients as well.
Yeah.
And bless their hearts, because in the modern world, you're not only just, cooking dinner, cleaning the house, taking care of the kids, you're usually working full time too.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a really different dynamic to, again, bring us back to mindfulness and awareness, because back in the day, like if I think about my grandmother was grazing all day long. She was eating while she was cooking. So your blood sugar's stable, you're eating, you're producing energy, your mind is clear, and she was able to clean the house all the time and be this kind person to everyone. And then I, even look at my mom, which is just a generation under that, and she worked way more than grandma ever did. And there were times at home where we would just eat out because mom was tired. And I think that that's okay sometimes, but again, balance and looking at where I came from, there was never balance displayed for me. It was chronic overworking and the never ending to-do list. So I think, like you said, breaking it down, and I do that with my clients as well, is, okay, let's pick the top 1, 2, maybe 3 things on that never ending to-do list. Let's get those done. Let's give ourselves a reward of some sort. Let's be happy with that 1% progress, because that happiness that you allow yourself to feel is going to compound day by day by day by day. And then before you know it, usually about 30 days at least, I'd say it takes people to develop a habit. I think James Clear says it's maybe 60, but
just do it. Yes, 100 days.
And that's why my programs are 12 to 16 weeks. You know, I'm like, okay, I understand life happens, and I want to teach you and give you clarity over this period. And then if you need extra time, we're going to maintain it. We're going to figure out how to maintain it. Right. Yeah. But the funny thing that makes me think about, actually, this is in my book as well. The trash can experiment is what I call it.
Yeah.
And if we want to really think about the gravity of our daily habits, I just want you to visualize this. Okay. I got a new trash can, and the old trash can used to live in my pantry. It was a long, tall pantry. I could open it and the trash can was inside of it. Close the door. It's completely invisible. You can't see it unless you open it and throw trash in there. New trash can does not fit in said pantry. So new trash can had to be placed right by my entryway to my house. It's right by where my keys hang. I'd walk past it in and out every day. And every time I went to throw away garbage, Taj, guess where I went to throw the garbage away?
The pantry.
The pantry. And that just spoke volumes to me. I was like, wait a second, I can see that trash can over there. And I'm still going over here to throw the trash away. Imagine what it's like for somebody to try to build a healthier eating habit, or going to the gym regularly, or mindfulness checks, or even just getting yourself to read daily or something, some form of self-care that you're trying to incorporate that you're not regularly doing. I could see the trash can and I still walked by it.
So good. I love that. So then what's in that analogy, to create that solution, like, what's the solution part for being able to not continue to go back to the same spot?
Yeah. Well, with the trash can specifically, I took a James Clear approach on this.
Yeah.
And, gave myself a cue so that I would see that the bin was open, and then I wanted the house to be clean. So I didn't want the bin to be open. So every time I had to throw garbage away, or every time I walked past it, I would notice that it's open and I would have to close it. So it's just a small change that's rewiring me.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, it became autopilot again. And I knew where my trash can was. So same thing with nutrition and fitness and these stress monitoring, activities that we're going to do, which often are very, very simple things. They don't have to be long things. And you have to start with what's tolerable, right? So,
yeah, I mean, for nutrition, it could be placing certain foods at a certain place in your fridge so that you don't keep grabbing in the same place, right? It's just you're rearranging and adapting that habit to something else that's going to serve you. Or, I love habit stacking. James Clear, we're just writing a love letter to you.
I know.
Right. I love habit stacking with clients because you're the fact that you're already taking energy to do something that's habitual, and you teach the simplicity of like associating something new with that, it makes things so doable for people. So like if you're trying to get into, planning your meal prep, right? Well, and you're like, oh, I just keep forgetting, or I keep buying this stuff, but it goes wrong it rots because I just keep forgetting. Well, the place. But like, if you have the habit of taking your groceries out when you get home from getting your groceries, instead of putting, your chicken straight in the freezer, maybe, and if you've planned on prepping that day, take your proteins and put it in the middle of your fridge, right smack dab in front of you, and make it inconvenient
Make it
for
obvious.
yourself.
Yeah.
So that you have to like, oh my gosh, this chicken, I freaking have to move around it to get it out. Yeah. I might as well just put it in the crock pot like I planned. So then,
Yes.
and and with, you hear about the, like, take your clothes out in the morning or the night before to make sure you work out in the morning or whatever works for you. For me, it's like, wear my workout clothes so that I get it done that day. Whatever works for you, but giving yourself a cue, like you said, and here's the deal. I'm just going to throw this out there. If anyone's listening to this and you're like, I don't know what my cue is, jump onto our Instagram and ask either one of us what that cue could be for you. You don't need to hire a coach. Sometimes you just need to ask the question. And I don't think you're asking the question enough and then you just stay stuck. So don't be afraid to reach out to people that you actually look up to or that you listen to. Just ask the question, because more than likely you're going to get an answer and you don't always have to pay for it. So I just want to throw that out there. Speaking of, Ashley has her book that is launching. I'm looking over my notes really quickly. Oh, we already talked about your process in your book that you talked about, this 5-step process that she talked about in regards to changing habits. This is something that she's going to be going over even more in depth in her book, and that's going to be launching soon. So I'm going to have information on her book, on how you can coach with her. You mentioned something about a PCOS girls' night. Okay, I'm going to share information about that, but I have no idea what that is, and I want you to share about that.
Sure. It's also a space for women to be able to meet and connect, and it's a safe space.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you can sit there with your coffee or your mimosa or your whatever and connect with other people and ask questions. And I think those spaces are so much more conducive to making changes when you have someone like yourself who is a professional in the health aspect of this space, where you can guide them and it doesn't become like a Facebook group where people just send opinions to each other. Like when you can have someone to guide you and then you have that community, it's so much more impactful. So I'm excited for that. I'm going to post that link in our show notes too, you guys. I really love that your approach is about mindset too. Something I just wanted to throw out there is like, you might, part of this practice that Ashley's talking about with taking a pause and reflecting and gaining some awareness and asking yourself, like, is this working? Is what I'm doing helping me get to where I want to do? Ask yourself if your attitude and your thoughts are helping you, if you're chaotic, or are you able to just stop? You mentioned before, like when you were referring to your grandma and your mom about like what the difference was, it made me think about my grandma and my mom. And we'll skip over my grandma. We'll talk about my great grandma, because my grandma was like, she was a gypsy. She like was all over the country and the world all the time. But my great grandma was, like you said, she was a hard worker. She was kind of grazing throughout the day, but she focused on her health. She was very intentional with her health. She just understood, like, I need a strong body to support a strong life for my family. And I think it was like a slower environment, right? Then I think about my mom, and her approach to everything was chaotic. Like, oh my gosh, like, oh, this small problem, like just everything is happening and to me and at me, and I have to hyper focus on it, and it's not even going to really do anything, but I have to hyper focus on it. And at the meantime, I have all these other things that need to get done, nutrition, getting some movement in, prioritizing sleep, hydration, like very basic things. But your approach very much matters. I don't know. Did you go through something like that, like with your attitude and how you approach things? Or have you always been this chill and peaceful? Because you're just sitting here like, and I'm like, oh, I just love this about you. But I want to know if if you ever went through that.
Yeah. No, I absolutely went through that. And, I can be so chill about this now because I realized how passionate about it I was, and because it was what I lived. Like what you described of your mom is very much so what I saw from my parents. I lost my brother when I was 14. And that very much so, I think, put me in this chronic fight or flight mode for a long time. And I didn't realize it. And the stages of grief are not linear, just like progress, which I love because, as my therapist described to me, we can move through the stages of grief, which if you don't know them, just Google them, and it's 5 stages. And you don't move through them in order. Sometimes you can move from denial, which is step 1, all the way to acceptance, and then all the way back to step 2, and then all the way to acceptance, and then back to denial. And it's very different for everyone. But again, I didn't realize that the person I was, this high achieving person who only slept 4 to 6 hours a day, only ate maybe once or twice a day, was fueled by coffee, was fueled by stimulants. I didn't realize that that was a problem. and then when I started having some of these symptoms and they just get exacerbated, it just really makes you stop and think. And I think there's always going to be a turning point, which for me, I talk about it in my book as well. I was a head coach for a gym where there were small group personal training classes. We had large group, and I also had personal training clients and nutrition clients. So at any given moment, I was writing 4 different programs for the classes that were running there. I was in charge of the other coaches. I was in charge of all of our nutrition clients, and I was in charge of myself. and I have a husband. And so, it was so much to balance, and my body started giving me warning signs. Like I was withdrawing. I was not as passionate about what I was doing. And I think sometimes God gives us, signs that it's a transition, or it's time to transition to something new, or we're moving into a new season. And I think that's where my framework really comes into play for not only myself, but my clients as well. It's just, okay, the mindset piece is teaching us that awareness component. Okay, what season am I moving into, or what am I trying to move into? And sometimes it's identifying that, and you got to sit with it for a while. It's uncomfortable, and you start these new habits that are going to change everything for you. And then you miss one day and you get all upset, but you just got to get back on the horse. And if you miss one day, well, do it the next day, and then be happy about it and try to do it the next day. And so I definitely had to learn how to give myself grace. Because one of the biggest struggles for me was, it was a 5 a.m. coach. And so I would get up at like 3:30 in the morning and, get ready and then go in, and I had to provide the energy. And it didn't matter how tired I was. I showed up for those people because I love and care about each and every one of them so very much. It's making me emotional because I miss them. But I know that those pieces have to be there for me to show up for the people who need me.
So good. I love this conversation so much. I feel like I could talk to you about this and so much forever. And I adore you, and I love what you're doing. And I'm so excited for where you're at, because you're such a great encourager in this space, and you're such a great educator. And I think that's what we need a lot more of, is just educators and people that can sit back and relate just like how you do with other people. So I'm so excited for your mission and just the space that you're in right now. Thank you. Thank you so much. I just adore you. And I could talk all day. So we're probably going to have you on again, but because I could talk about this all day, especially habits. It's interesting, like one last thing, and then I'll wrap up. It's interesting. Everything that we talked about today, you guys, you've heard it before, but you don't probably dissect it enough, and you don't make it simple enough for yourself. And you're probably pushing yourself to a place that's causing you to have a lack of awareness on how you can be able to grow in the way that you want to. And so if you have not grown in this area, ask questions is all I want to say. But I'm so grateful. I'm going to have all of Ashley's information in the show notes on how you can connect with her, how you can coach with her, how you can get her book, which will be launching soon. Do you have a date by chance, or is it like mystery?
It is not a
It's
date
2025.
Yes,
Okay.
2025.
Awesome.
But I'm in editing right now,
Yes.
and we'll be
Ooh.
moving into production after that. So
Oh,
the book
awesome.
will be available on Amazon before we know it, probably
Yes.
early summer if I had to guess. So
Oh, it'll be
yes, I'm
so good.
excited.
So in the meantime, get into her girls' nights so that you can be able to get to know her, ask questions, have that education and foundation that you need. And I just want to say
They're usually on Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's usually like the third Thursday monthly. So just check my Instagram and you'll be able to know when the next one is coming up.
So cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I will have all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time and for blessing us with what you have to share. I'm just so excited for everyone to be able to hear this. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you for having me,
Yeah.
Taj. You're amazing.
Oh, you're amazing too. All right, you guys, have an amazing day. And